Hey everyone, it's Jake. Welcome to Crashing Your Planet, brought to you by Spark and Fizz. Thanks as always for listening. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes thus far. This will have been episode number 3 of the show. And today I'm talking to Ryan Walsh of the Boston-based indie rock band Hallelujah the Hills. So Hallelujah the Hills recently celebrated their 10th anniversary of bandship, of bandom, of being a band. And naturally, as any 10-year-old band does, they recorded a new record, consulted with David Crosby on Twitter to get his advice about recording effectively a new album. They invited an author from the UK to join them in the recording studio and write a book about what they're doing. Just sort of your typical 10-year birthday of a band traditions. So that'll all be kind of boring to listen to, but I'm kidding. It's incredibly interesting. I did enjoy talking to Ryan. I've been a fan of his band for several years now. I've seen them once. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you that. So anyway, by the time you are hearing this, the new record by Hallelujah the Hills entitled A Band Is Something to Figure Out will have been officially released. It's coming out April 12th. This will have been released on the 18th. So if you haven't already purchased it by the time you've heard this, then make sure you head on over to hallelujahthehills.bandcamp.com. You can order the record on vinyl. There's a limited vinyl pressing of it, and there is a not as limited CD printing of it, and there is, as always, a digital release of the record. We'll give you a little preview of a couple of the songs in this episode, but you're gonna want to make sure you hear the whole thing. It's really great. It's a great record. So yeah, follow Ryan on Twitter at Jahills, JAHHILLS. He posts a lot of interesting things. He's pretty active on Twitter. He's written some cool articles about. He's got some interesting takes on Spotify, which we talk about a little bit. He also, we sort of alluded to this in the interview a little bit, but we didn't really talk about it much. But Ryan wrote an article for Boston Magazine, which we will link to in the description, about the recording of Van Morrison's record Astral Weeks, which was recorded in Boston in 1968. And he is currently writing a book which sort of expands on that article and many other things, which, like I said, we talk about it a little bit, but it's an interesting article, and you should keep your eye out for the book, which is due out not immediately, but within the next couple of years, I think. So anyway, yeah, check that out if you get the chance. And I'll stop talking. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Ryan Walsh. All right, well, I guess we're in it. How's everything going?
I'm well. How are you? You like Jake or Jacob?
Jake. Jake is fine.
Nice to meet you, Jake.
Yeah, you as well. All right, let's talk about your album.
Sure thing.
You've got a pre-order set up already. It seems like that was fairly quick. Didn't you guys just record just like a few months ago?
Yeah, what's going on is we really enjoy putting out albums, and since we've left Misra Records, that was the first 2 records they put it out. You know, we've kind of done it on our own or in combination with other small vinyl labels. So we've learned how to like make that process as quick as possible, which we just enjoy doing for a bunch of different reasons. So we funded this album with pre-orders back in the fall. We just turned it on. We said it was an album. We gave it a fake title, and people bought it, and it was enough to record in the studio. And so yeah, we finished it in November. We did 5 days recording in November up in upstate New York, and then we mixed it and mastered it. And with the internet being the primary distribution model for music these days, it doesn't need to be the giant wait time you would see in the last couple of decades. It's interesting because this probably mirrors the 60s more than it does, the 90s or the 00s. People would record an album in the 60s, and goddamn, that thing would be in stores a month later. I have particular interest in that Van Morrison album, Astral Weeks. I'm writing a book about that and more.
Yeah.
And that album was recorded in late September, October, and in stores, I think, late November, early December.
Wow.
That's crazy. Pressed, printed, out. So we like that model, and we try to streamline it. And so, yeah, we move quick.
I was going to say, it seems like records were released probably a bit more frequently also.
Exactly,
back in those days. Because at this point, I mean, you hear all this stuff about, people trying to press their records to vinyl and everything, and there's like a 4 to 6 month waiting period just to get the test presses, and it's like hardly even feasible to have an album out in the same year that you recorded it.
Right, yeah, there's two obstacles to getting something out quick these days. One is if you're going to press to vinyl, because there's very few plants and they're all slammed because there's money to be made there again.
Right.
And the other one is getting all the marketing ready. But if you're a small band like us, who we do all the marketing ourselves and that's minimal. I mean, we just send some emails, try to get people to listen to it and launch some Facebook ads. It's interesting. There's been less and less reason to adhere to that, one album every 2-year cycle that's been developed over the last few decades. It seems like people adhere to it more and more, which is ridiculous. If you've got something to say, write it, record it, and get it out. I think that's the most interesting for us. I don't want to speak for how it should be or anything.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel the pressure to? I guess you kind of just answered it, but do you feel like you're obligated to stick to a schedule like that? Like if a year or two has gone by and you haven't put something out, do you start getting antsy about that?
I don't think there's ever been, since the band started 10 years ago, there's never been more than 2 years without a new album. And besides the Misra stuff, it's just us enjoying making music and wanting to do more. It's not really pressure. It's just this is what we do and how we have fun.
Yeah, that's something I was curious about, because I've heard you talk before about how Hallelujah the Hills is a band that, you guys aren't making your living off of it, and you can just kind of do it on your own terms. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about that in some capacity. I guess one of my main questions is, was that sort of the initial idea going into it, or has it just kind of fallen into place where you've settled into where you guys are comfortable sort of existing?
I think the idea with the band was always to just pursue ideas, musical ideas that we were into, and to have fun. And then everything else would be icing. And I think that's worked out really well for us. I think that's why we lasted so long, is because, whether a band's public about it or not, I think a lot of bands start out like, how can we become rich and famous?
Right.
That very question, I think, is it's kind of like a strychnine you stir into your creativity coffee pot. if you're putting that question out there. It's just bad for business. So, but I'd also be lying if I said, it would be so cool if we were at a level where we could all make a living off this, because then we could make more records. So that would be, it's not like it's not like we're not interested in being obscure, but, but we're at this level where a certain small group of people really love the band, and their enthusiasm of the band fuels us both monetarily to make new records and excitement around what we do to keep going. Um, so I can't complain. I could complain, and in fact, in fact, I do, but I really try not to, because I don't know if there's anything less interesting, unless you're going to complain in an interesting way.
Yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying. It's sometimes I have to fight the urge to look, on Facebook and see all these bands putting things out just constantly every day. There's a
Putting
new
out, putting out what?
just new records, new everything.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is recording stuff. So, I mean, sort of contrary to what we were just talking about a minute ago, people are just kind of like, more and more often it seems, just recording things and then just same day throwing it up on Bandcamp, and then, hey, look at my new album, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I guess it's, I don't know, it's kind of, sometimes it's,
Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because that's beautiful. You have a thought, you capture it, you put it out there.
yeah,
Wow, that's a frigging miracle. But at the same time, you want art or your music that you ingest as a listener to be thought out and carefully crafted. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. I don't know. But there's I think every band or musician just has to find the middle ground. Like, what's the perfect amount of time between when I come up with the idea and when it hits people's ears? And it's really cool to have a freedom where everyone gets to decide that time frame themselves.
right. Do you find yourself getting frustrated at all with that sort of thing, like from a listener standpoint, if you see someone's posting their album that seems like they spent an hour recording on their like built-in laptop mic or something, do you ever I don't know, do you ever get frustrated when you see that sort of maybe lack of care being put into stuff?
To be honest, I don't see a lot of that. And that might just be because the type of band that's doing that, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But, well, like, let's take someone like Bob Pollard of Guided by Voices now.
Yeah,
He's one of my favorite of all time. And he just cranks them out, but in a way that I really enjoy that. I find something to enjoy on each record, and as he builds and builds, I find that interesting, that he won't stop and he keeps that pace. So like that becomes a whole new layer of enjoyment. And then in a very different spectrum, if you look at this last Kanye West album, I find that fascinating too, because he kind of made that record in public and kept adjusting it after he released it a little bit, which is a brand new thing. And it was confusing. Kind of anytime someone that famous does something confusing, I'm a big fan of it, because usually when you're that famous, your goal is to just assure everyone you're going to maintain the same level of quality and you can trust me. I'm not going to freak out. And to disrupt that model, it's interesting.
yeah, you're totally right. Do you keep up with stuff like that? Do you you seem like you're often on the pulse of all the new, whatever's the big new thing? Do you keep up with new music pretty well?
I try to. I couldn't say if I. It's hard to judge if you keep up with it or not, because I don't know. I'm not the type of person who is like, oh yeah, all the good music's been made.
Yeah.
Definitely love listening to new stuff. Um, but it's hard to find the time to do it. I've said this before. Like, I think listening to new music at your day job office desk at a low volume is it's a real detriment to music. That's a terrible way to take in new music and make a judgment of whether you like it.
Yeah.
You want to be blasting that thing in your car or in your headphones on a bike ride to really let it sink in. And also, you have to be some kind of editor for yourself because you can't give all the music all the same amount of chance lengthwise that you're going to devote to listening to it. And it's hard to know which music is A, just shitty, it's never going to click with you, and B, which music is that kind of music that takes 4 or 5 times to click in before you're going to love it. So everyone has to, I think, make their own set of rules for how they're going to listen to new music.
That's a really good point because I, up until recently, was working in an office and I would totally, I had Spotify on my office computer and it's so easy to go, oh, I'm going to check out this new album, and a minute and a half into it, if you're not feeling it, it's so easy to just click away and retreat to something that you're gonna like.
Yeah, there's zero barriers to obtaining music anymore. So if you're not mindful of it, yeah, you can start to treat all music as instantly disposable,
Right.
and I don't know who that benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. A recent example is I don't know, sometime last year. There was a new Jeff Rosenstock album out. Are you familiar with him at all?
No.
He was in that band Bomb the Music Industry, which I never got into, but a lot of my
Oh,
friends
we played a
have. And
show with them once.
oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
That seems yeah, that would make sense. So yeah, he does like solo records now, and like I said, I never really got into him or his other bands, but I checked out his latest solo record and listened to the first song, and I was like, it's this isn't for me. And then I ended up seeing his band a few months later, prior, like having only listened to the one song off that album, and then a couple months after seeing them, I revisited it and realized, like, wow, this is really, really, really good. And it became, I listen to it all the time, and it's fantastic. And it's just kind of weird to be in that world where I could have easily just like forgotten and never looked back into it. Uh, it's like such a fine line between something that could become one of your favorite things and something that you could never think of again.
Right. Yeah. So I often wonder, like, w- is that is that already, or is that going to change how people write music? I mean, can a band that no one knows make a really, for lack of a better word, difficult album that anyone? You got to get that first person who's going to give it the time and vouch for it and say, yes, this is worth your time. So it's so interesting because, in a way, all the obstacles have been removed. Anyone, anywhere can record and get it out, but there's more obstacles than ever competing for listeners' time and effort into making their own call about music they listen to. It's so weird. It's a
Yeah,
brand new thing.
it is super weird. That's why it seems to make more and more sense. And this is something that's just been on my mind a lot just in recent months that a band might even want to just follow the model that your band is currently using, which is basically we do this on our own time, on our own terms, and it, without having any sort of obligation to do one thing or the other, you're able to just make what you want to make, and you don't have a record label to please. You don't necessarily have any commitments to anyone other than yourselves. I don't know. It seems like as time goes on, just sort of using music or being in a band in that way, as opposed to using it to just like propel yourself to the next step, whatever that might be. You know what I mean? It seems like just more of a viable
Well, viable
option.
viable is an interesting word. Like, I think this is good for creativity and bad for sales. I'll say
Right, yeah.
that about how we do things. Um, I don't know. I don't have a solution.
Yeah,
But
I
like I
don't I
said,
don't either.
but because we're having fun and making this music that we're really into, and a small group of people love it. Like I said, that works for us and has for a long time.
Yeah. And I mean it seems that way, and it seems, I mean, you're a band that I sort of would, I'll look at from the perspective of me with my band, and I think like, oh, that they seem like they're in a good spot. Like you seem like you've just sort of settled into just a good realm for a band to exist in, because there's so many. It seems like there's a lot of bands, probably a lot at this point in time, who, I mean, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, their band started and they toured a lot and they maybe got some recognition and they're on a decent label or whatever, and I think a lot of bands probably get stuck having to tour even if they don't want to tour, and having to maybe record an album when they don't want to have to record one. Um, it seemed like, I'm sure you've heard stories of bands that just kind of got trapped in the rigorous touring life that they maybe wish they didn't end up in.
Yeah, but I think the getting burned out from touring, I don't think that so much comes from labels anymore, but more like that's the only way we can pay the bills.
Right, yeah.
But the result is the same, I think. Yeah, if you disrupt that balance, you're going to get burned out, no time to write, and then maybe the next record sucks.
So you guys were never one of those hardcore touring bands, I presume.
When we were on Misra, we did a lot of touring, I'd say. I mean, compared to others, it's nothing at all. But you know, when we signed to Misra, the head of the label said, what do you guys need to be a functional touring band? And I said, a tour van. And we spent the advance on a tour van that I bought. And whether I needed to go to the store and get some milk or play a show in Los Angeles, I drove that same van. It
Yeah.
was my car. And for a few years, we hit the road a lot, did the whole country, Canada, and I had a blast. It was really fun.
And you toured with Silver Jews, right?
Yes, we did. Yeah,
You must be one of a very small number of bands who can say that,
that's true. Yeah,
right? Because they didn't really
they
tour,
barely
right?
toured, and I think that band Monotonics was their. I hope I'm saying that right. That was their opener for a lot of those shows, and yeah, their David Berman is like there's no one I look up to more for lyric writing than him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that was fantastic, and I've kept in touch with him. I was kind of pen pals with him since like '03 or something.
Oh,
Started writing him because I had an old band called The Stairs,
yep, yep.
and in like a weekend we recorded a cover version of the entire Natural Bridge album by the Silver Jews.
Oh, that's cool.
And I met him at a poetry reading he was giving, and I gave him that, and that kind of triggered a pen pal thing. But then, yeah, we got to tour with them. It was amazing. For someone who, said he was not a showman and would put on a bad show, they were a great live band. Really great.
Man, I remember it must have been, I don't know if this was the tour you guys were on or not, but was it like 2008-ish? Was that around the time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that must have been the last. Was it the first and last tour? Was it only one tour that they did?
No, I think there was two, and I think it was like '06 and '08.
Okay.
So we were on the second one for it was a tour in support of their last album.
Right.
Look Out, Look Out.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I remember like I was in high school at that time, and I used to go to the Northampton box office website to just see what shows were coming to Northampton every so often, and I feel like I remember seeing Silver Jews like on the schedule somewhere, and it was probably like right around the time I may have been like finding out who they were, but I didn't know them yet. I was probably like really getting into Pavement at that time, but I didn't know the Silver Jews yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just one of my kick myself. I really wish I had.
You blew it.
I totally blew it, and I could have seen you guys too. That's double whammy. Did you play the Northampton one?
That was interesting. For some reason, we didn't. That was in the middle of that tour, but I forget why we didn't play Northampton. But we were there, but we didn't play that one.
Oh, okay. Did they? We could stop talking about Silver Jews in a minute, but I have that DVD that came out of theirs, and there's like live footage on that, and it seems like he was. Did he like use a teleprompter or something for lyrics?
No, he had a music stand with all the lyrics, which it was there. I think just to put him at ease. I don't remember him looking at it much.
Okay.
But it was just the kind of thing where if you haven't been touring for a long time, you don't really know your ability to memorize 24 songs of lyrics. So it's kind of a gamble. So yeah, he had that up there, but I don't think he was looking at it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's just something I've been sort of curious about since I watched that. Yeah, man, that's really cool.
I'll tell you one story from that tour.
Please do.
I think we were driving we were going from Toronto to Montreal, and we had both left Montreal, both bands, at around the same time, but we weren't like in a line on the highway. And I was in the passenger seat, and our drummer was driving, and the rest of the band was asleep. And up on the highway, we're approaching what looks to me like the Silver Jews tour van, and it's pulled over, and all of them are running out of the van through a field towards another car, like up the road.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at the drummer. We had about 5 seconds to process the whole thing. And I was like, did you see that? Was that the Silver Jews fleeing their van and running through a field? And he was like, I think it was. And like the rest of the band was sleeping. And I was like, well, they're never going to believe this. But we called them up on their cell phone. I called Cassie, the bass player, like a half hour later to find out what was going on. And they had, for some reason, they had spotted like some kind of domestic fight. Like a guy was pulling a girlfriend out of a car, and they hit the brakes, and they were going to break up this fight.
Wow.
Like a team of superheroes. So I was talking to Cassie, and she's telling me this whole thing. And then I hear David lean into the phone and he said, Ryan, it was a job for the headliners. Really funny.
That's really cool. That's really interesting. David Berman, he's such an elusive seeming guy. It's just like weird to even think that you could have interacted with him, let alone be sort of friends with him. That's kind of bewildering to me.
Yeah, he's very easy to talk to, and he's got a great mind. Love him.
So, I guess let's talk about your new album a little more. This was your 10-year anniversary album sort of thing, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when we were in the studio, it was about to the day 10 years since the first rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a cool mile marker to kind of realize. And yeah, we played a couple shows to commemorate that too. And there was actually, for the whole album recording and those two kind of birthday shows in the fall, there was an author from the UK. His name's M. Jonathan Lee. He came over to witness the whole thing, and he's writing a book about the band and us making this album.
Right. Yep.
And that'll be out sometime in the next year or two.
That's exciting. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was. It was a tricky thing because there's no chance to meet him in advance and see if we got along. I Skyped with him.
Yep.
And if you have someone in the studio who's bad vibes, for lack of a better term,
yeah,
like that's terrible, and that's really going to affect the album. But he was great, and we all got along with him, and we had a lot of fun. It was like a week adventure, and I'm curious to see what he'll say about what we did.
I am too. That's kind of a rare thing to even be able to get any sort of look into that process, especially for a band, like you guys. I mean, it's not like a 33 and a third is gonna be. It's not
Sure.
It's like that, but it's I don't know. It's
Yeah, but I know. Basically, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. We kept telling him, when he said he had already sold it to his publisher, we just reiterated one more time. We're not famous, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I didn't want to say it.
Yeah. No, but man, 33 and a third, they're going to be kicking themselves when this thing sells 200 to 300 copies. They're going to be ripping their hair out. We could have had this.
That's well, they're going to have to live with that.
Yeah, that's their cross to bear, man.
Where did you guys record this album?
We did it at the same place we did the previous album. It's called 1809 Studios. It's in near Rochester, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And they have sleeping quarters there, which means, we go and we stay there and we wake up and, you could be in the control room in your pajamas playing on a track within 5 minutes of waking up.
Yeah.
That style of recording is really appealing to me. The previous albums we did, album 1 through 3, we did in piecemeal over weekends and stuff.
Yeah.
And I like those albums, but I don't know. I think we hit a groove with this idea of get it all done in 5 days.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you think just being away from where you live is conducive to that too?
Yeah, your home is a magnet for distractions.
Yeah.
You've got your chores, you've got your friends calling. So it's nice to go hide out somewhere and just focus on one thing.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Do you guys do? What is your? Do you have a preferred approach? I know David Crosby lent you some advice via Twitter. That was pretty cool. But do you shoot for live versus tracking, or do you have any preference?
We like to do the basics live. So that's usually like at least drums, bass, and my rhythm guitar. And then usually Joe will play his lead or secondary guitar live as well. And then Brian um, will add his synth or keyboard or trumpet later.
Okay.
And the vocals, of course, later.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of writing in the studio?
I do a certain amount. Um, you know, we don't have a lot of time to fuck around. We budget wise or time wise. So the album is written, but usually I will leave maybe 20% of the lyrics unwritten till I'm there. And that's for two reasons. A, it's just because I just didn't finish them. Nothing clicked or I just didn't think of it yet.
Yeah.
And B, I like to leave that little wiggle room because I don't know, putting yourself in a corner will do some interesting things that wouldn't have happened if you had all day.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting to me because I don't know, I can't even really picture doing that. That seems incredibly daunting to know you have to finish something within that 5 day span or whatever it is. Because I've heard of other bands doing that. I mean, doing more than that. Have you seen that documentary about the recording of Josephine by Magnolia Electric
No,
Company?
I know what you're talking about, but I haven't seen that.
It's on YouTube. Last I checked, so it's definitely worth watching. It's really good. They recorded it with Steve Albini. But there's like scenes in that where it shows him writing like entire songs worth of lyrics just in the studio, and that's it's wild to me. Just
Well, yeah, I think that's fun for both the creator and the listener. I mean, you know, you're you just want you don't want to be too rigid with any element of a rock band because the very idea of a rock band is that you're kind of just smashing up a room and seeing if that smashed room looks cool. And audio, but that metaphor fell apart because we were talking about sound. Okay, but it's the same reason people like improv, comedy improv. There's a thrill about when things don't go as planned or things are spontaneous. There's just there's just something about it that's not you can't replicate it with with pre-writing or whatever.
Sure. Since you kind of set up the segue, I guess I kind of wanted to talk with you about comedy for a little bit because you guys have also existed in that world to some degree. Between the Silver Jews and the being on Never Not Funny, you're.
Do you listen to that show?
I do, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I would say there's a good contingent of the band with definitely comedy nerds,
Mm-hmm.
and we love all that stuff. And so it kind of that whole us like dipping into that world started in like I think '08. I saw that Matt Besser from the Upright Citizens Brigade had put it on his website that he loved our first album,
Yeah.
and that blew my mind because I've been enjoying UCB, the TV show, for years. And so I reached out to him. We were both going to be at South by Southwest that year. And so he invited us to be the kind of house band at the live show. And it went really well, and we had a lot of fun. And it was just this springboard for us doing stuff with comedians, particularly UCB and Matt. So we've done an episode of Improv for Humans,
Mm-hmm.
and the comedian James Adomian was the star of one of the videos for the last album.
Yep.
And that was incredible because he just came to my house and did like a half hour of improv as a shitty band manager, pitching us video ideas.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I mean, this that he took the time to do that, and then I spent the whole summer filming his ideas as if we had made them real. So I don't know. It's just there's a lot of that overlap with bands and comedians. I think it's just creative people who don't take themselves too seriously and love ideas.
So you didn't know James Adomian prior to that video?
No, no,
Oh,
I pitched it to him, and he was in town for a show. I went to see the show, and the next day before he had to move on, he was able to come over and do that. I just saw him a couple weeks ago because he's on that fake Bernie versus Trump mock debate tour,
yeah, yeah.
and they came to Boston, and it was a super funny and scary show, particularly on the Trump end.
Oh, really?
Well, just like that guy would say something horrifying, and most of the time it was made up, but then sometimes he would like break out of the character, and he's like, "Look it up. Trump actually said that." But yeah, I saw James after the show, and it was great.
That's cool. I was planning on going to the Trump versus Bernie thing in Manchester, and it snowed pretty bad that night, and I didn't end up going, which was a bummer. But I've seen the videos, and I was looking forward to it.
So good.
But yeah, no, I was under the impression that you and James were like just friends, and he just came over to your house and did that video. I didn't realize that was a sort of a blind pitch kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep. It always, if you have an idea, it's always worth throwing it out there, I think,
Yeah.
And, people say no or don't have the time, and you just have to, as long as you're comfortable with people saying no and you don't become a annoying asshole about it, it's, I don't know, it's worked for us.
Yeah. No, it's good to hear you say that. I mean, I've sort of gone back and forth over the years about, for a while I would think, oh, what I really need to start doing is to just start emailing like bands that I like and see if we can play with them sometime or something. And then and then after a while I realized like, oh yeah, that's not really a good approach. But I go back and forth about like the pros and cons of trying to reach out to people like that. And I mean, I think if you can frame it in a way that isn't entirely selfish, that's just, I know your band has fans and I want to cash in on them. So, let us open for you sometime.
Yeah.
I think there can be a lot of benefits to doing that. It seems like you've found a fairly good approach as far as that stuff goes.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah. You there's nothing wrong with wanting to play with a band you like. I mean, that's, I don't think that's particularly selfish. Jake, you gotta chin up, buddy. You just.
No, it's funny. I mean, I go, like I said, I've gone back and forth a lot, and I feel like, I don't know if you have had this sort of thing, but I don't know. I feel like every 6 months to a year, I'll just have like a radical change in what I think is the right approach to doing primarily music, but I guess you can apply it to anything. But every so often I'll just be like, oh, I've found the answer. I know what I need to do now. I need to, whatever it might be. I need to just start emailing bands and asking for an opening slot or whatever. And yeah, and then some time will go on, and then I'll start to think, oh, maybe that.
You know what the trick to that is? Anytime you kind of blindly pitch someone or ask someone for something, I think you just have to kind of include in the ask, hey, it's okay if you say no or don't have the time to write back.
Sure.
And that just giving that out, I think that's enough.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think for a while I sort of I didn't have the perspective as far as realizing that, you know, if a band is gonna travel to play somewhere, then they're gonna at least hope to make some money and you know, hopefully play to a crowd of some size. And you know, a lot of times I would reach out to people not necessarily keeping that in mind. The first guest I had on the show was, do you know the band Roz and the Rice Cakes from
Yeah,
Providence?
yeah, I do. Yeah, I saw them like 3 months ago live, and I thought they were really great.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they are great. We've become friends with them over the last couple of years, and I talked to her at length about that kind of thing. You know, just about being offered a show and having to sort of deal up front with the whole, you know, can we get gas money situation, and sort of just sort of weighing that stuff out. And it took me a while to realize that was a thing for bands of a certain caliber, you know.
You should name your podcast "Bands of a Certain Caliber."
That is good. So yeah, I since I just sucked the life out of that tangent, do you have a sort of a set approach? Do you get offered things like that often, and do you have a method of dealing with it, or
Offered shows, you mean?
yeah, do you get a lot of like cold call, do you want to come play this place kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. We you get offers, and you just try to everything. We just try to weigh whether it's worth all five of us to schedule and make the time for it. Um, and as everyone gets older and has more responsibilities, your time becomes more scant. So you have to, yeah, we have to be choosy, but we try to say yes to things that seem like
Sure.
they'd be fun.
And you only you I feel like I saw that like maybe last year or so. Did you play like your first New Hampshire show, or was it the first just in a long time? Or am I making that up entirely?
No, you're right. Yeah, we hadn't played New. Yeah, we weirdly we've never played Providence, Rhode
Oh
Island,
wow.
which is the closest city to it. I don't know why. Maybe Roz and the Rice Cakes hook us up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, we've played Maine. Trying to think if we played Vermont. We should definitely check all these New England towns off.
Yeah. That is pretty interesting to me. That I mean, you guys have always been a Boston band, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's pretty nuts. Are you planning a tour around this new album?
I think so. I think we'll do something this summer. I'm not sure yet what.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in. I like you have a nice perspective on things, and I want to try to tee you up to talk about something because like Spotify is something I see you're frequently writing and talking about Spotify. And
That's a nice way to put it. You're you're often online ranting
yeah.
and
But I haven't. That being said, I haven't necessarily been able to glean whether you're pro or anti Spotify at this point.
it's because I'm probably both. I think it, and that's okay because it's a complex thing. Um, I love using Spotify, and I think it's really pretty revolutionary, cool thing. But um, I have a lot of questions about it. I mean, not just me, a lot of people do. And whether it's even a sustainable company. And, I just wrote this thing for Vice's motherboard a couple weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
about how they have begun just removing tracks from the platform that they suspect are involved with list streaming fraud. Do you know what that is?
Um, I think I read your thing about that. The whole the motor and media kind of stuff, like trying to.
Yeah, well, Matt's a different case altogether. You should have him on your show, actually.
Okay.
But um, basically, someone contacted me. They were experimenting with just playing their song over and over again to see if it would add up to a few pennies in their royalties.
Okay.
And it led to Spotify removing their song completely from their platform. And that raised a whole bunch of questions for me. And I won't explain it all. People should go read the article if you're hearing this, because it does kind of the decision Spotify is making about how they're going to police their platform does have the potential to kind of alter how people are allowed to listen to music and what constitutes a song or not. And that's kind of crazy. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a
Oh,
little
that's
bit.
okay.
But yeah, it's super complex. But people should be asking questions now before it's the norm and no one has a physical record collection anymore. I think, which sounds crazy to say today, but 50 years from now might be the case.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it seems completely possible. Um, yeah. I don't know. I kind of opposed Spotify for a certain amount of time, and I gave in eventually, and then I kind of realized I had no real reason for opposing it to begin with. Um, I mean, I think it kind of bridges a gap to some extent, because I feel like a pretty huge chunk of the people who are using Spotify now are the same people, and I can include myself in this to some degree, who were just pirating music prior to that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's evidence that X number of streams equals Y number of less illegal downloads. They've proven that, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, is the model of this first famous ubiquitous streaming company, Spotify, is the model sustainable for not only artists but them themselves as a company? They're not profitable yet,
Right.
so it's like it's a weird thing to throw all your chips on. It's
Yeah.
like some guy, so if some guy came up to you in the street, it was like, listen, I've had a company for 7 years. We've never made a profit, but you should only use us. You would be suspicious of that guy.
Right. Right.
So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I don't hate Spotify. I have a love-hate relationship with Spotify.
Sure. That's fair. I mean, you put it in perspective for me at one point. One of the things I listened to or read of yours, that was, you pretty much say it's too soon to tell if any of this is sustainable or whatever. I mean,
Right? Yeah. No. Exactly right. They're yeah. The music industry is fairly new as an industry. The recorded music industry. So
right.
when people talk about norms, they're talking about whatever 10 years they decided was the golden era when it worked. But the truth is, this is all just the beginning, and things have never stayed the same for more than 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
um,
find that interesting too, people will usually look to like the 60s or whatever for as a point of reference for when music was good or what have you. And I mean, even at that point, like in the early stages of rock and roll and whatnot, there was some pretty weird stuff happening there too. Like was it the Brill Building, like the songwriting office, essentially?
Yeah, sure.
People taking credit for songs that weren't theirs, and like I just read a thing about Buddy Holly. They're, like band managers used to take songwriting credits on records they had nothing to do with. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, there's silly stuff like that where it's like, that was no better,
People, if you had a band that had a hit, but you broke up or you couldn't tour everywhere your manager wanted you to, there are cases where they would get another group of guys and go, okay, you use the same band name, I'm going to send you down south.
Right.
Like that's nuts. And you don't really, that would be impossible today, but that kind of thing was pretty normal.
Yeah, that is that is crazy. I think that exact thing happened with Buddy Holly. He, like, at some point it was no longer the Crickets, but the original Crickets would go off and tour, and they'd basically have like a replacement Buddy Holly, like singing those songs. I don't know. It's strange. It's very weird.
One time on tour in Cleveland, Ohio, we shared a green room with Big Brother and the Holding Company, who were playing the ballroom in the same venue. We were playing the little nightclub room.
Uh-huh.
And that's a famous band from the '60s, but obviously Janis Joplin is dead. But it was so weird. I was like, getting ready for our show, and I hear this voice that's exactly like hers, and I look over, and they have, a 30-year-old Janis replacement.
Yeah, right.
It's really eerie, and everyone else is kind of the original dudes from the band. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
when is a band still the same band?
Right. Yeah, that's pretty huge at this point. Like pretty much any band from that era that is now touring is 50% or less is original members, which it's just strange. I don't know. I guess it serves its purpose in nostalgia for the people that go to those shows, but
yeah, I guess if people know about it and they buy tickets, I guess on some level it is that band on a certain level.
Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like we jumped around a little bit, but I pretty much at least mentioned all the things that I was hoping to hear you talk about. So
if I could just have 5 minutes to tell your listeners about reverse mortgages, I would.
That's fine. The floor is yours.
Okay, so let's say you. No, this was super fun, man. I really appreciate you asking me.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate you doing it. I was when I first was starting up, I wasn't sure. I kind of wanted to build, start with people I kind of knew personally, and then you would be like the next step, and then at some point I decided I'm just gonna ask people like Ryan, and
start with the king, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's only downhill from here. But yeah, no, I really do appreciate it. I really appreciate your insight on all these things. I always take something away from hearing you talk about all these things. So yeah, it means a lot.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right, see you.
Private thoughts directly into microphones. The girl with electronics inside. The girl with electronics inside. And I can't seem to look away.
Pretty cool, huh? That was myself and Ryan Walsh. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a good time talking to Ryan. Like Hallelujah the Hills on Facebook. Follow Ryan on Twitter at Jahills, JAHHILLS. Follow the band on Instagram at Hallelujah the Hills, and go to hallelujahthehills.bandcamp.com and pick up a copy of their new record, A Band Is Something to Figure Out, in whatever format best suits your lifestyle. As always, make sure you go to sparkandfizz.com for more interviews, mixtapes, articles, videos, all sorts of things. Follow Spark and Fizz on Facebook, follow them on Instagram, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Jacob C. McKelvey. At Jacob C. McKelvey. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be talking to John Solomon of Comedy -1 Records, which was a lot of fun. So you have that to look forward to. Thanks for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. Oh, and please, if you can leave a review for the show on iTunes, that would be incredible. I'd appreciate it. We'd appreciate it. The world will be a better place if you can just do that. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.